Hey everyone, so in the 2024 Tata Steel Chess Rapid played in India, there was a very exciting game between Magnus Carlsen and Arjun Erigaisi, who was for a very short amount of time, he was the world number 2 and newly mounted 2800. Currently, he's rated 20, just over 2800, and he's world number 4 in the live rankings. And this shows that he's a very big talent and incredible. There's under 20 people, or if I'm not wrong, there's under 15 people who's reached the 2800 mark, and Arjun is such a young player, and this is very exciting in the world of chess. And so I wanted to show this game that they played, which obviously Magnus won, as you can tell from the score. But essentially, we saw a very interesting battle in the Taimanov. After e4, Carlsen chose c5, knight f3, and e6. So this is a rapid format time control, and they had 25 minutes with increment, and Carlsen decides to go for a very interesting Taimanov here. White chooses d4, the open, c takes d4, knight takes d4, knight c6, knight c3, and queen c7 here. So this is the trademark Taimanov move. After here, White plays the move bishop e3, which is the main move, which has a new, many ideas. Either White King wants to go queen d2 or queen f3, which is quite topical and very challenging. And so here Black plays a6, which is a very useful move, controlling the b5 square. And in this position, White chooses the move a3. And a3 is a very interesting move because, first off, the idea is simple, that if Black ever pushes b5, White wants to prevent Black from being able to push b4, right? That's the first. And maybe another idea is actually just to control the b4 square to prevent any bishop b4 ideas. For example, in the line with a6, queen d2, knight f6, long castles, bishop b4 here is the main line, and this is one of the big moves after f3 and d5. If I'm not wrong, d5 is one of the moves, if not, knight e5. And, maybe there's some pressure on the knight on c3 here. Black doesn't want to take immediately because that would give up the bishop pair so easily, but in the future, this is an idea. So instead of that, White chooses the move a3 here, and this is interesting because here, first off, Black has a decision to make. They can either play the move b5, which is very logical, and White's big idea is that they actually want to take on c6. Now, why do they want to take c6 here? Because this allows the queen to recapture, right? But the point is that if White plays the move queen d2, then White can easily fall into some problems after knight takes d4. And if you play queen takes d4, then the queen is moved twice, essentially, right? But if you play bishop takes d4, then potentially, this move bishop b7, let's say along castles, and I'm thinking already to play a move like e5 followed by knight f6. And this looks very interesting for Black, because even though this is unusual to put a pawn on e5, I think that this makes a lot of sense. And we can check the engine here just to say that, the position is completely equal here. And there are some ideas of b4 as well in the position, and Black is fully equalized, essentially. So that's the idea why knight to c6 may be an option whenever Black plays a move b5, which is why after a3, important is that Black took on d4. Now, is this better than the move b5? Not technically. So both are just, reasonable options that could be played. But this is Black's idea, is to prevent the move knight takes c6 from happening. So after queen takes d4, Black plays b5. Very typical. And I think that it makes a lot of sense to develop the bishop to b7 first, and only then go knight f6 to develop. Because if we develop knight f6 too early, then White can immediately play the move e5. And so we want to meet the e5 move by being able to put our knight in the center of the board. So Black played b5, very logical. Here, White played the move bishop e2, which is a bit interesting because I would say that if White wanted to castle short, then Black basically has no problems, right? But if they want to castle long, then they should just do it immediately, which is what I thought would happen. But instead, White played bishop e2, and after bishop e7, very logical, White decides to long castle. So interesting, to put the bishop on e2 there. It could have also went to d3 if they wanted to, but long castles. Black plays rook c8 here. And this is the big point, is that it's nice to develop the queen side first before ever touching the king side, because rook c8 puts some additional pressure on the c2 pawn and gives White an additional thing to think about. After king b1, just getting out of the c file, Black now plays knight f6. And from this position, I think it makes a lot of sense just to play the move bishop f3, but in the game, the move e5 was played, which is a very interesting move. After bishop f3 though, I think that black has no problems after playing a move like bishop c5, getting the bishop out of the pawn chain, which is the big point of the Taimanov, right? And then after, let's say, queen d3, I mean, this endgame is possible, but I think that black has no issues with a very active rook. And then maybe even, yeah, king e7 stepping in the future, and very reasonable position. Instead, if white plays queen d3, then black now plays d6, and has a nice center, actually, and I don't think that black faces any problems in this sort of position. So instead, white chooses an interesting move to e5 here. And, okay, so the idea is that now black gets knight d5, and then after knight takes d5, which is kind of forced because we are threatening to take the knight here, knight takes d5, bishop takes d5, now black has a very active bishop, and objectively speaking, you know, playing a move like a3 in the opening is kind of giving up the advantage, but a lot of moves can be played and the positions get very interesting, so a3 is not a bad move per se, it's just one of the possibilities in the position, even though objectively, probably not best, you know. Okay, and here, white plays the move bishop d3. Very interesting that they're actually giving with the g2 pawn, but surprisingly, this is a very reasonable sacrifice. I mean, Arjun wouldn't go sacrificing a pawn like this for no reason, so he has a lot of compensation after the move bishop takes g2, rook g1, and now bishop d5, centralizing the bishop again. Now white plays the move h4. And this is their idea, is that they have ideas of pushing the pawn to h5 and maybe h6 in the future. So black decides to shut down, first off, this bishop on d3. And after white plays the move queen f4, trying to maybe infiltrate onto the dark squares here, black plays bishop e7 and just develops. After white plays the move h5, trying to put some additional pressure on this g6 pawn, Carlsen simply played the move rook f8. And if you look at the position, actually, this position is pretty much equal, but of course black is the one that white is the one that needs to prove the compensation here, because it's not that easy. Black is up a pawn, white has the two more active bishops and the better rooks basically, but a pawn is a pawn, and sooner or later black is gonna try to advance these queenside pawns, maybe the kingside pawn, with the move like king b7, maybe a5 and b4, and so black has their own counterplay here. And white plays the move bishop d4, which is an interesting move, but probably inaccurate in this position. But of course, this is rapid. You don't expect the players to play the best move every single time. But a better move here would have been the move bishop e4. And after, let's say, we trade off the bishops and play the move queen c4, trying to exchange the queens, and that would be a very good endgame, obviously. So white plays rook d4, or let's say queen c6, and of course, white should avoid the exchange of queens. We can try to trade off the bishops with bishop c5, let's say rook f4, and in this position, taking on e3 would probably not be that good, because there are these permanent dark square weaknesses in the position. So instead, interesting move suggested by the computer is queen d5. And yeah, pretty much this position is alright. And the point of queen d5 is that if you ever take on d5, it turns out that this d5 pawn, even though it's a weakness, is actually just as weak, if not weaker. Is just as weak, if not maybe even less weak than this e5 pawn. So basically, the e5 pawn can easily be snatched up with a move like rook c6, rook e6, while it takes some time to get to this d5 pawn, and so yeah, that's possible. That's a possible line of play. Instead, white could play bishop d4, but then black plays d6 here and tries to chip away at this annoying e5 pawn. And the chances here are perfectly equal. No side is objectively better, but it's it's one of the only ways actually to play for like sufficient compensation, basically. So instead white to play the move bishop d4 here, just defending the e5 pawn. But now black plays a very nice move queen b7, which is the big idea, because they need to start their own counterplay somehow. Otherwise, white is just going to be better in the long term with their better minor pieces. And so here white plays the move rook g3, and now black plays b4, trying to open up the king here. After a takes b4, queen takes b4, Arjun decides to take on a6 here, which is a very strange decision, because first off, it allows the move rook a8, which should have probably been played, because analysis shows that after rook a8, which is the most natural move probably, and bishop e2, and the black plays a move like queen a4, threatening mate in 1, white can try to run away with king c1, but now black plays a move rook c8, let's say, just targeting again c2. White essentially has to play the move rook c3 here, because if you play a move like rook d2, trying to defend, it simply runs into mate, right? So instead rook c3 is probably best, but now after rook c3, because there's a pin down at the 4th rank. White is forced to take with b takes e3 here. And essentially, yeah, like the position is equal in terms of material, but in terms of quality of, of like pawn structure and everything considered, black is pretty much better here. And analysis shows that maybe black can even go on to take this pawn on h5, and then maybe even go with a move like h6 here. And this is a very interesting line. The point is that you cannot take on h6 because of bishop e4, and the mate threat is basically unstoppable because rook d2 again, queen a1. So yeah, that's a very long line of analysis, obviously, which definitely, could have happened, could have also not happened. But basically, this position is quite nice for black, and it's a very thin line that white needs to walk down, and it's not very difficult for black to see the sequence. But instead, Carlsen goes for the rook b8, which is interesting because I don't think that it has a threat besides maybe queen a4 next, threatening both the bishop and the check on a2 there. But rook b8 is a bit more passive, So now Arjun drops the bishop back to e2, and now Carlsen plays rook a8 after spending 2 minutes. So he probably realized his mistake, but it's better, to realize your mistake and undo your mistake rather than just not want to admit that it's a mistake at all. White plays b3 here, just securing the king's back rank. Queen a5 here, threatening queen e2, and now white plays bishop b2, which is not the best, but it's all right. The only way to kind of prove the advantage here is to try to go with g5 after queen e3, the crazy move f5 here. And of course, in a rapid game, this is very difficult to see such a dynamic move. But instead, Carlsen played the fine move queen e2, and then went rook c8, c4. This is kind of forced, but now black simply takes on h5, and yeah, trying to distract the bishop away. And after queen d4, black plays h4 here, getting a tempo on the rook h3, and now rook g8 here. A very nice move, actually. First off, this is still a pin, so the bishop cannot be taken. White plays the move king c2, and now queen to a8, because there was the threat of rook a1 here, potentially. So queen a8 makes a lot of sense and really shows full board vision here, because now there's a potential idea of playing a move like bishop e4 check. So in this position, best would have been to play the move bishop f3, and after bishop takes f3, you cannot take on d7 here, because after king to f8, there's the additional idea of playing the move rook d8 here. And so instead, rook takes f3 is best, but now rook c7 and just defending this pawn. And this kind of position is objectively equal, but it's very difficult to play for both sides. And I would say it's probably more difficult to play this from the black side, because black has a pawn, but everything is kind of loose and weak here. So very difficult and very reasonable idea to go for this gambit, as we saw early on, to gambit this g2 pawn. Very legitimate. But instead, white goes with the move rook c3, which is already a mistake here because it allows the move bishop e4 check. And the problem is that the king is running out of squares. And so this forces bishop d3, because if the king steps on any of the dark squares, a move like bishop g5 would be deadly. And it's so after bishop e4 check, bishop d3. Now, since the rook's path has been closed, black now plays the move bishop f3 to attack the rook. Rook to a1 here, queen to c6, improving the queen's position. Bishop takes h7, grabbing the pawn, but now this allows the rook to infiltrate on g2. And after bishop a3, trying to trade off some pieces and perhaps weaken some of the dark square control that black has, takes, and now h3. This position is simply lost because the pawn is running through, and there's nothing that white can do to stop it. So after queen h4, trying to stop the pawn, still, yeah, black simply goes h2 here. White, Arjun thought here that he could play rook a1, but this simply fails to the move rook g1. And now the rook is being attacked, and there's a threat promotion. So Arjun decided to take on h2. Black took the rook. Bishop g6, one final trick, so that if you take, then there's going to be a perpetual, basically, and that would be a very unfortunate way to end the game. Instead, black played the very calm move, king d8, and Arjun simply resigned here. So king d8 is, among other moves, there are other moves here that also win, but this is a very clean one. And yeah, very, very nice game. First off, by Carlsen to be able to win like this. And this kind of shows like the interesting complications that can happen in the Taimanov, and is a really good, you know, ambassador of a game, basically, just to show how deadly the Taimanov can be. And yeah, it's one of my favorite Sicilians, actually, because the positions are so imbalanced, they're so wild, they're so crazy, and there's still a lot of room for creativity. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video. Went on a lot of tangents, but that's how, you know, my chess analysis typically goes. So hope you enjoyed the video, learned a thing or two. If you play the Taimanov yourself, hopefully this, you know, you could see some interesting maneuvers and ideas in the middle game. So thanks so much for watching. See you next time. Bye.